Hey everyone, I wanted to share a word with you guys. It's a message that God has been speaking to me about for a number of years now. What I'm going to share with you stretches back as far as 2007. Well, it actually goes back further than that, but let's go with 2007. It has to do with the times we're living in and the things that are going to be coming. And it's actually playing out right now. And with that, let's get started. Most of the things that God gives to me are in dream form or vision form. Sometimes words of knowledge, things like that. What I'm sharing with you now came in a dream, but it's been reinforced and clarified by some other things. The dream started out with me seeing scene after scene of private gatherings. I saw groups of people gathering into rooms that looked a lot like classrooms. And at first it appeared pretty normal. On all these, I was standing outside the classroom, outside the room, outside the door, looking in. And then things would take a turn. Suddenly, people would start trying to allure people, try to influence them. They began to engage in sinful things. And when they did this, they noticed that I was standing there, and they didn't like that. So someone would come to the door and close the door, preventing me from being able to see inside. And I saw this again and again and again. And then the scene switched. No, before I get to the next scene, let me note, there was a distinct feeling of them wanting to keep this hidden. What they were doing in secret so that nobody would discover them. But as time went on, they became more open about what they were doing, who they were, what they wanted to bring forth. And many of them had actually obtained positions of power and influence and had begun to use that to influence others on a wider, more broad scale. Okay. Now the next scene, I saw a nondescript city. Could have been any city in the U.S., but I knew it represented the U.S. as a whole. My view zoomed in to a particular T-shaped intersection, and on one side of that intersection was a fountain, and around the fountain was a large concrete walkway. And I saw people walking on the walkway, going about their daily lives, doing their thing. And then suddenly I saw all these people running through the crowd of people. These people running would run up to people and randomly attack them. They'd hit them, they'd push them, they'd stab them with knives, and then they'd run off and go do it to somebody else. And they do it again and again and again. Now, before I go on, does anybody see any correlation between what I just said and what's happening today? I think maybe some of you can. It might feel familiar to you or seem familiar to you. What I just described is what has been unfolding in this country over the past 8, 9, 10 years. It's especially evident recently with all the outlandish attacks and unreasonable, just there's no other word for it, just completely unreasonable things that people are coming up with to attack others with. I mean, be it politically or in areas of religion or thought or belief, whatever it is, people are just at each other's throats. And this is what God is showing. He's showing the culmination of these things as they sprung up, as they were cultivated within these groups, and the seeds were sown, and the seeds were watered and germinated and grew and began to flourish and spread. And it's these people who are attacking people that these things have sprung forth in. And we're seeing that now. But let me go on. After seeing this, I knew that these attacks would be turned back. I knew they wouldn't go on forever. They just can't. We can't stand that. Eventually people will calm down. So that's good news. They'll become more reasonable, though not totally reasonable, because people just aren't reasonable sometimes. They'll back off the constant and merited attacks, though again, not totally, because people will still be people. But here's the problem. By the time these things are turned back, we're going to be severely damaged as a country. God showed me something like a meter or a progress bar on a computer. I saw where the bar would be at 100% or at 0%. And at one time in our history, we were at 100%. But after these attacks, after these things have been turned back, as a result of them, we had actually decreased in power or strength by nearly 50%. That's significant. Now, how this equates to real life scenarios, I'm not entirely sure. I don't know what this strength represents. I don't know exactly how we'll be harmed. I just know that we will be harmed. And in fact, we have already been harmed to a degree, a significant degree, but not 50%, I don't believe. And I'll give more commentary on that later. Right now, I just want to tell what I know, what God has given me to tell. So, more on that later. But God went on to say that in whatever capacity that we were damaged, it'd be evident to other countries. And in fact, other countries are going to form a coalition of sorts to advance against us. Not good news. They're going to recognize our weakened state, and they're going to try and come to take advantage of it. Again, I don't know in what capacity they will try to do this or how it will play out. I just know that's what they're going to try. But the good news is God isn't going to allow them to succeed. God himself is going to defend us. I saw angels that were released to go to war on our behalf. And some of these countries that came against us were broken for taking part in this plan. Other countries were entirely consumed. Now, once again, I don't know how this equates to real world events. I just know this is what God has shown me. So however that plays out, that's up to God. I really don't know. I've prayed about it. I've asked for it. He hasn't given any more details on it, but that's the basic gist of the dream, and what God has been saying. So let me comment on what I believe is happening and what have you. But remember, these are just my comments. Okay, I gave you what God has said and what I know God has said. These things are just my thoughts. So for any would-be prophet hunters out there, false prophet hunters, turn your radar off. This is just me talking. First of all, I want to say that I don't say this to be all doom and gloom. I'm not a person who's down on the United States or believes that it's in dire need of God's judgment or fire raining from the sky or anything like that. That's not me. I don't like giving these kinds of words, but it's what God has said, and I got to do what God says to do. But if you know me, you know that's not my style. But there's good in this, in that it helps people be prepared for what's coming. So if that brings comfort to people, to know these things will be turned back, to know that we will be okay, God will defend us, then good. Please take from that and hang on to it. I don't I also say this because I want people to know that they need to choose not to contribute to this madness. They need to make the choice to not be a part of it. I know there are those who will hear this message and they will pinpoint certain groups as being responsible parties for what's happening in our country. And you're probably right. But it also probably goes further than just those one or two groups you might be thinking of. Whoever you might have in mind, it's not just them. Between politics, race, religion, even within the church, there's this attitude of people being at each other's throats and it being okay. But it's this very attitude that's tearing us apart. It's this very attitude that's weakening us. And all these groups have been lashing out at each other. That's not good. And we need to be sure that we don't take part in this. It's like every time, for example, it's like every time I post something, even the most, what I believe to be the most benign posts possible, there's always somebody, some Christian who comes to drop a one or two line insult, one or two sentence insult, just to jab at me, just to maybe try to get my goat, and maybe try to upset me or whatever. Maybe try to feel as though they're being God's righteous servant. I don't know. But whatever it is, this is the kind of thing that needs to stop. This is the kind of thing. These are the people running through the streets stabbing people. So it's not just those people out there. Anyone who does this plays a role in this. And it's pervasive. It goes from person to person to person, and it turns people's hearts dark. We got to stop. And as far as these attacks are concerned, I don't believe we've seen the peak of them yet. I don't know where we are on the scale. When God showed this to me, he literally showed me an arcing scale. Okay? It arced. Like craziness just kept getting worse and worse and worse until it peaked. And then we started to come back down. I don't know where we are on that point. I don't think we've reached a peak yet. And that's an issue. How much worse it's going to get, I don't know. I've contemplated releasing another word that has to do with what's coming to the church in the coming years. And one of the things that God has shown me is a considerable increase in persecution of Christians. More than we've already seen. I hear people out there saying how Christians out there saying how persecuted they are. You haven't seen anything yet. That might be some of what's coming in this arc. I don't know. I don't know for sure. It's very possible. I could see it coming. I personally believe that we'll see these attacks stop when people meet the consequences of their choices. For instance, while I don't know how the United States diminishes in power, I tend to think it will revolve largely around financial issues, not just here, but around the world. And once people get a taste of what real hardship is, that has a tendency to wake people up. It causes the prideful to become humble. And I think we have a dose of that coming. I also believe this is why other countries will come after us. I believe they'll see us as the cause of the world's financial troubles. We'll be the scapegoats. We won't actually be the number one cause. We'll probably contribute our fair amount, but many countries just are not fiscally responsible, and we're one of them. But we'll be the scapegoat, I believe. And if you watch the world stage, then you can probably see that the seeds of this are being sown already. So I think that's going to be a big part of it. Maybe not 100%, but a big part. And while I didn't mention it, there is a spiritual component to this. I can't remember if I released a word about this or not, but there's something that got released in our country many years ago, and it's been deceiving many for a long time, and many lives have been disrupted. Many families and friendships have been broken. I personally have lost friends to this spirit and to what has happened, and these friends have fallen away from God. I tried very hard to keep it from happening, but I couldn't do it. And while we can pray concerning these things, which is good, one of the best things we can actually put our hand to is not deepening the divide. To not join with those who are lashing out and causing more harm to others. That would go so far in healing this, in keeping that meter from going so far down. Because unlike what people think, a lot of what God says isn't written in stone. This doesn't have to happen, but it's where we're headed. If we stopped right now, we'd be far better off than we will be if we continue for the next 1, 2, 5, 10 years. This doesn't have to happen. It can be changed. And maybe it will be changed. I don't know. I hope it is. But I also want to note that this isn't a judgment from God. People are far too quick to proclaim God's judgment, and this isn't it. This is us bearing the consequences of our actions and our choices. That's why I say, if you go back and look at the words I've posted, they all link to this. Well, not all of them, but many of them link to this in some way. Trying to get people to make better choices, to choose wisely. And this is why it's going to hurt us if we don't stop this. It's going to hurt us more. We've already been hurt, but it's going to hurt us more. We've really been led by brokenness. And people are being more and more broken because of it. So don't contribute to that. Don't join in with that. And keep your own team on their own side, so to speak. Choose wisely. And I believe God will bless us for it. Well, that's all I have to share. But before I go, I'd like to mention that I'm now open for personal prophetic ministry. Actually, I've always been open for that, but I'm being more vocal about it now. So if that's something you're interested in, you can find a link below that will take you to my website, the requests page on my website, where you can make a request. But before you do, please watch the video. Please understand the video. And then submit your request. I'll talk to you later. God bless. A lot of the things that God gives me come in dreams. If not a dream, then it's probably a vision.